Welcome back to Wickedly Judged. I'm Rebecca, your host, and this podcast is dedicated to exposing wrongful convictions, flaws in our justice system, investigating their causes, and fighting for justice. If you haven't already, I encourage you to go back and listen to our first 3 episodes covering the state of Ohio versus Johnny Watkins, a case that exemplifies why our work is so important. In this episode, we will be tackling the state of Florida versus Garrett Arrowood. We have an exclusive interview with Lisa Arrowood, who is the mother of Garrett and the sister of the victim. I think the way I just want to handle this today is I want you to tell your story. The listeners need to hear your story, because you are not only affected by the fact that your son is sitting behind bars for a crime he did not commit, you are also the victim's sister.
Okay, so on Wednesday, June 24th of 2015, my sister was supposed to have a meeting with a friend, and she failed to show. So after attempts to call her to see what was going on, they called my parents to see if they had heard from my sister. And my parents, too, tried to call her and couldn't get her. And she lived a short distance down the road from parents. And so my dad jumped in his truck and ran down to check on her. And when he got there, her garage door was down, which was unusual at that time of day. Went to the door and didn't get her. She had a small window that looked into her garage. And so he looked in there and he could see her car sitting in the garage. And he could see her slumped over in the car. So, of course, he freaked out and was trying to see, even grabbed a crowbar that was close around, trying to pry the garage door open. And eventually, he said he calmed down enough to think, let me see if there's a garage door opener in this truck of my niece that was left there in the yard. And he did, and was able to open it. And when he opened it, he could see that my sister was deceased. And so he said that immediately 911, called my mom. They got down there. My sister was deceased in her car. The glass was shattered, so that gave an indication to my dad immediately that something was, he didn't know what had happened right at first, but the glass on her driver's side door was shattered, so he felt like something just from that, wasn't right. And so, of course, they cleared the scene and got him out of there and all. And they didn't tell us for quite a while that she had actually been shot, but eventually we did find out that she had been shot 3 times in the face at close range with a .22. Her house there were some items that were stolen from her house. There were guns missing and arrowheads missing. And the way they knew, she had a coffee table that was glass that she would keep them in, as well as other places, but it was real obvious that the drawers were open and that they were missing. They were gone. So they knew that arrowheads had been taken. Then to the guns, there were some guns out of her safe. You can imagine our worlds were completely turned upside down. That doesn't even begin to describe it. So of course we all gather at her house and they have it all taped off, and FDLE, which is Florida Department of Law Enforcement, they came in to investigate it because they wanted an outside entity to investigate this. They were not professional. Looking back, especially now, I realize the lead officer in charge was telling our family they didn't know yet what happened to my sister. So we're all standing out there, waiting for them to tell us what happened. And one of her friends walks up and tells us that she was shot 3 times in the head. And we're like, who told you that? And they're like, Susie over there, she overheard the officer, which was an FDLE officer, saying that she was shot 3 times in the head. So I go to the lead officer and I tell him exactly, who did you hear that from? Point them all out, tell him who said what. And he's like, no, we still don't know. We're still doing our investigation. Well, come to find out, that was exactly true. The officer did walk out there, did say it, leaked it all out. Then it played on the news. Just a whole fiasco right from the beginning. Looking back, at the time, we were all so devastated that really weren't paying attention to those little details. Shortly therein, a local officer, Robbie Hooker was his name, he was given the lead. He had never done a murder investigation information, but he was the local lead investigator. He's asking about my sister's son. His name is Michael, and my son, Garrett, because both were known to have drug issues. Like we gave them all of information for Michael and for Garrett. Gosh, well, that was on a Wednesday. Of course, our world is just turned upside down. We're all grieving, gathering down at my parents, trying to figure out who in the world could have possibly done this to Shelley, my sister. Lo and behold, 3 days later, really 2 days later, my son was arrested. We were not even informed. My parents got a phone call at their house, and this is on a Saturday. They said, we have arrested someone for Shelley's murder, and if you want to come up to the courthouse, we can give you more information. Of course, my dad tells us, we all load up and go, and as soon as we pull into the courthouse, everything's empty. It's Saturday, except for there is some police cars and my son's white Trailblazer sitting in there. And we're like, what is going on? And when we start walking to the courthouse steps, Mandon Whidden and his father, Rodney Whidden, are there on the courthouse steps. Mandon is down at the bottom. Rodney is up at the top. Garrett is nowhere to be seen. So as we come walking up, the lead FDLE officer comes out to meet us. Well, we have your son detained in connection with your sister's murder. And I mean, you could have just knocked us down. We're like, what? What is going on? And we just need you to, step back in your cars. We'll come out to talk to you. And during this time, Mandon is calling to me. He's calling me Miss Lisa. I don't really know Mandon real well, other than just to tell you we live in a small community. I did own a gymnastics school, and when Mandon was a young child, he took a few classes there, not much. Point being, everybody in town did know me, and they knew me as Miss Lisa because I ran the gymnastics school. So he's calling for me, Miss Lisa, please come here. And I'm like, I have nothing to say to you, Mandon, because I'm sitting here thinking, here you guys, all three of y'all are connected with my sister's murder. I have nothing to say to you.
Right.
Mr. Danny, come here. Garrett had nothing to do with this. I swear, nothing. And my husband said, well, then who did, Mandon? And he said he just turned his head. And at that time, I'm looking at the top of the stairs, and Rodney is up there. And I'm like, are y'all involved in this? So we go back to the car, and then they come out and they tell us, they say that our son was out selling arrowheads with the Whids. They believe that he was involved in my sister's murder. I don't even know how to explain the emotions of that, other than what's going through my mind at the time is I just can't even believe that, because my son is just not murdering kind of person. But then I'm also thinking, well, my goodness, this is FDLE. At the time, I had a very high regard for them. I'm thinking, well, if they're telling me that this is true, there must be something to it. So instead of just jumping right out saying, oh, no, not my son, like, I need to know if my son is involved in this. We need to get to the bottom of this. We just sit back, try to digest and process what's going on, which is not an easy thing. And really, we don't have any information. They don't let us see, don't let us talk to him or anything like that. We just know that he's been out selling arrowheads with them. Really, what's going on now that we know, and I'm able to see interviews and read and see things, what happened next was they take Mandon and Rodney in to be questioned. Rodney doesn't speak. He has quite an extensive background with, going to prison and being in trouble. He doesn't speak to him. He tells him he wants a lawyer right off. Garrett gives 2 interviews in there trying to tell everything that he knows, where they were selling arrowheads, because he's like, yeah, we were selling arrowheads. The Whiddens had a bunch of arrowheads. They did have a lot of arrowheads. And to be honest, we still don't really know 1,000,000% that those arrowheads did come from my sister's house, because it's not like there's a barcode or anything on an arrowhead to say exactly what's what,
Well, let me ask you this, Lisa. Did they take your sister's full collection of arrowheads, or did they just take some of them?
Well, what was missing from the house was only some of them, not all of them. So there was still arrowheads in cases left in my sister's house.
So they don't
It's
even
like-
really know that they were from your sister's house. They're just saying that they were.
That's true. And I mean, even my niece during trial, when they handed her the bag of arrowheads that was collected from Mandan and them that they had been out selling, I mean, she went through them and she's like, well, yeah, I think this one is from my mom's house, but no, these aren't. These aren't. I think this one, yeah, this one was from my mom's house. Further in this interview, they end up booking and charging Rodney with dealing in stolen property because people that came forward that said that they actually bought the arrowheads from Rodney. Like, it wouldn't even be from my son. My son was with them, but they were actually buying them from Rodney. Mandan is in giving an interview, and he says, just to paraphrase it, if y'all will give me a cigarette, and then I'll just tell you everything. And so then he starts going in and he says, well, I can't say that Garrett killed his aunt. What I can say is that Garrett came to my house and he had some guns in his car and they were up under his console. I was sitting in his car and I was smoking a joint, and I dropped the joint and I leaned down to pick up the joint and I saw the guns under his seat. And I said, dude, I'm a convicted felon. I can't be riding around in this car with these guns in here. Garrett said, it's okay. I'll get rid of them. And so Garrett went into the abandoned building while Mandan sat in the car. Garrett went in with the guns and then he came out and didn't have the guns. So he's telling the cops all of this in the interview. Now let me clarify a couple of things. One, Garrett had a Trailblazer that has a console, like a completely closed-in console. If you were sitting in the seat and you dropped anything to lean down, you could not see under the driver's seat to see any guns.
Right.
So that right there was another statement that Mandan gave during this time when they're asking about, did he know anything about Miss Strickland? That was my sister's last name, Miss Strickland's death. And he made this crazy statement of, well, I don't know, but if I was pulled up in my garage and there were two dudes standing in there looking all crazy, I'd freak out and shoot too. And they said, well, is that what you're saying? Are you saying that Miss Strickland was in her garage and she pulled in and there was two dudes? Oh, no. I don't know that that's what happened. I'm just saying, if that happened, that could have happened. I found that so odd. Like, I've memorized that statement. I have gone back and thought about that. Two dudes standing there looking crazy. That is very specific information in my book. But at any rate, Mandan Whidden takes these police officers down to their property in Lake Bird, which is about 15 miles from downtown Perry, takes them to the abandoned building, and it's, I've heard the audio recording of this, where the officer goes in there while Mandan stays outside, and he goes in and he doesn't find any guns, and he comes out and he says that Mandan is so upset because he is just certain Garrett went in there in that building, that he went in with guns and came out with no guns. He's so certain about it. So the officer goes back in there to do a second search, and all of a sudden he notices that on one of the air vents that he can almost see like where a fingerprint was, he says. Now this is not recorded. He doesn't turn on his recording for this, so I can't hear audio of how this goes down. Only what he writes in his statement. And so he notices that now, because man is just so adamant that these guns have to be in there. He notices that little speck up on the air vent, and so he gets up there, and when he pulls it down, he finds two guns. They definitely were guns that came out of my sister's house because the serial numbers matched the empty boxes that were left in her house. So we know they came from my sister's house. So you have Mandan's word saying that Garrett took guns in. He didn't go in there with Garrett, but he just knows he came out without them. And then Rodney tells him as they take them down there, this is one time that he did. He says he saw Garrett have a gun and that he kept it under the bed where he was sleeping in their camper. Probably didn't clarify this in the beginning. We knew Garrett was having a drug issue. We had been after Garrett to go back into rehab. He had already done 1 year of rehab, probably 2 or 3 years before this. Sadly, like most drug addicts, Garrett was not real interested in quitting his habit. My husband and I were both very adamant that he needed help and that he needed to go back. So Garrett was trying to stay away from us, trying to stay away from our house, because we were constantly like, okay, let's sit down and talk. We got a problem here. And that is what actually pushed him out chance meeting, how he ever even met up with the Whiddens. I'll have to come back and tell that story a little bit later. Completely by chance that he even runs into them. And that is how he got hooked up with them. Rodney says, we're staying in this camper. You're welcome to stay down here. Was perfect for Garrett because he could sit down there and get high with these two and not have to come back to our house where he lived and hear parents gripe about him going to rehab. Rodney says that he saw Garrett with a gun, and it was under the bed where he slept. Where did Garrett sleep, they ask him. He says, oh, he slept right here in this bed. 2 different reports. I can only go off the reports that they read. One says there was a gun found under a pillow on that bed area. Another one says it was found under the mattress. There was a gun found that also belonged to my sister in the bed that Rodney Whidden claims that Garrett slept in for, I think it was 2 nights at that point.
Let me ask you this.
All right.
Did they ever do any kind of fingerprint analysis on the guns?
There was no fingerprints on them, completely wiped clean. So they say, at this point, I don't really trust anything that they say. I can only go what they tell us. They tell us that there were no fingerprints on any of the guns.
So you're telling me somebody that handled these guns, and if you just kind of visualize putting 2 guns up into an air vent, there should be fingerprints everywhere.
Yep.
There should be fingerprints on the air vent. There should be fingerprints on the barrel of the gun, the handle of the gun, depending on what kind, on the clip that goes in, or if they're revolvers, it would be on the spinner part. There should be fingerprints everywhere.
That is correct. That's my thought too, especially at this point. And the gun that's up under his pillow. Are you telling me that, let's for giggles say, okay, Garrett had a gun. He put it under his pillow or under his mattress because he's steady doing drugs, at this point. But he's smart enough to think about, let me wipe off all of these fingerprints off this gun while I put it up under my either pillow or mattress that I'm sleeping on.
Right.
That didn't make a lot of sense to me either.
Did they ever run ballistics to see if any of these were the murder weapon?
I don't know if they did. They just told us that they were not the murder weapon.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I don't think any of them were a 22. I think I recall just off the top of my head that none of them were the correct caliber.
Okay.
So I think we were pretty clear that there was 3 guns and that none of them were the murder weapon. I kind of have a crazy story about that, but we'll get into that later.
Have they ever found the murder weapon?
That's a crazy story.
Okay.
We'll come to that.
Okay.
They come back. So with all of this with Mandan, literally, they do not charge Mandan with anything. Mandan walks out free. He is not arrested. Rodney is arrested for dealing in stolen property. So Mandan walks out. My son is charged with felony first-degree murder. The only one out of all of them. Garrett, he talks twice, gives interviews 2 times without an attorney present. Just trying to tell everything that he knows about what has gone on. And he's like, did the Whiddens do this? And he's like, I don't know. I can certainly tell you that if they did, I didn't know it. Even after the fact, as time has rolled on, did they say anything? Did you see anything? Did you see guns? Garrett has always said, has never changed his story. He never saw guns. He never saw the Whiddens with guns. He didn't know that the guns in the bed where he was sleeping. He didn't know there was guns in an air vent. Arrowheads, yes. Whiddens had tons of arrowheads. And yes, we were out trying to sell arrowheads to come up with some money to buy drugs with. Absolutely, yes, we were. Did I know that they stole them from my aunt? He does not think that the arrowheads came from Shelley's house. Kind of questioned him on that about, why? He's like, Mom, the desk is in our office. Yes, it has lots and lots and lots of little cubbies in it. He said, Miss Whidden has one just like that. He said, when you roll that top open, he said, I'm not even kidding you. He said, I bet there's probably 1,000 arrowheads in there. He said, it's packed. I don't even, you can't even put another arrowhead in there.
Wow.
And he said that one day that when they were going, he said, Mandan said, I know how I can get us some money. He said, Granny keeps the good stuff for me. And Garrett was like, okay. So he says he pulls up to their house. He says they pull up and he says, good, Granny's gone. And he said, Mama, he said, that joker went up there. And he said, I didn't even know these existed. There was a fireplace that had, I guess it's like where you can add wood from the outside of the house. He told him, I'm going to have to get a little bit dirty to get this. And he said, I watched him. He went over there and opened the fireplace from the outside of the house, crawled through the fireplace, came in. He said, and then he came out with a T-shirt, and he said, Granny keeps my good stuff for me. He says, we can make some money. He says, and they were some big arrowheads. But he said he still, he didn't know what my sister had. None of us. I couldn't have even have told you what my sister had, because that was my sister's thing. That was something her husband got her into. That's not something my family ever did. So Anyway, he went in and got that bag of arrowheads and came back and got in the car and was they were like, woohoo, let's go. We're going to go sell some arrowheads to some people, get us some money to buy drugs with. So anyway, back to the story. They let Mandan go. So for 7 months, Mandan walked the streets. Well, it didn't take long. I had people start calling me. Man, I just ran into Mandan, and he was all tore up. He was high, and he's telling me that he freaked out. He just freaked out, and he shot your sister. And that's what I started getting. So here I am, and I'm telling the lawyer, still at this time, as far as lawyers are concerned.
So did any of those people that were saying that Mandan was telling them this, did they ever write any affidavits or do anything to help Garrett?
Well, not really to quote help Garrett. They would just come forward and just say that Mandan's out on the street confessing to people that he shot my sister. We did a court-appointed lawyer. We decided that we were not hiring a lawyer. Our thought was, if Garrett did this, he should reap the consequences of it. It's not acceptable. It's not okay. If he killed my sister, he needs to go to prison for life. End of story. So we just thought the system would be, if he did it, okay, they would prove it. If he didn't, then they're going to be cutting him loose, That's just not how things work. So if anyone is listening to this, the people that are listening to this, hire a lawyer. I wish that we had done that. Hindsight is 2020, but we were just grieving so hard at the time over my sister's death, arrest of my son. We just were not thinking clearly, and we just had faith in the system too. We had faith in the judicial system. Little did we know.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm telling the court-appointed lawyer everything that's going on, and they're supposedly interviewing people and taking their statements and all this about Mandan. At some point, our family was never even notified that Rodney was let out of jail. I guess he posted bond or something. I still don't know the story on that. And the only reason that we knew this was because I had a friend of mine call me on January 21st of 2016 and say, have you heard the news? And I'm like, what? They've arrested Mandan and Rodney and for your sister's murder. Yeah, they picked them up. I'm like, I thought Rodney was in jail. We didn't even know Rodney had been released. Nobody even let us know that Rodney had been released. So this is 7 months later. My sister was killed in June, and so now this is January. Now all of a sudden they're charged with my sister's murder. I'm the one that calls our court-appointed attorney to tell him he doesn't even know that they've been arrested. He's like, oh my goodness, let me call and find out, So he calls, oh yes, they were arrested. I'm like, well, then they must have some evidence or something, So he's like, oh yeah, this could be good for Garrett. Maybe they've got something, maybe with the people that's came forward and all this. So long story short, he comes back and basically no new evidence. They've just now decided that they're going to arrest him and charge her with her murder. Okay, that's really odd. So the whole time, the indictment date that my son was charged with was Tuesday the 23rd. That was the day before my sister was found, because their medical examiner had said that they felt like 12 to 24 hours before my sister was discovered was the point where she was killed. And there was quite a few factors that went into them determining that. So for 7 months, the indictment date for my son is the 23rd, that Tuesday. Well, when Rodney and Mandan get arrested 7 months later on January 21st, their indictment date is the 22nd and the 23rd and even the 24th on the day my sister was found. So they indicted them for 3 days as a possibility of the murder. They also did a superseding indictment that we had no clue of. our court-appointed attorney, I'll be honest, I don't think he had a clue, to be honest, that there was a superseding indictment, because they now changed, instead of the 23rd as Garrett's indictment date, they now add Monday the 22nd. We didn't know that until our post-conviction attorney that we did hire, and how we have found out all the things that we have found out. He was just blown away by that. He's like, what did they have to make them change this date? You don't just change a murder indictment date 7 months later without having some evidence to back that up.
Yeah,
what evidence do they have?
That's got to be some pretty hard court evidence when you've already gone to the grand jury and the grand jury has already issued the indictment. Now you're going back to the grand jury and saying, let's add this date.
That is correct.
Now, where in our legal system does it say you can do that?
Oh, and just wait till you find out the story on that. So we're actually, by this time, we're getting geared up to go to trial, Long story short, when Mandan and Rodney both get arrested and charged for my sister's murder, Rodney, again, clams up. He doesn't talk. He wants a lawyer. He doesn't issue any kind of statements to him. Mandan, he goes to telling stories. And stories does he tell. So immediately they offer him a plea deal. So he will get a 15-year sentence if he tells all the truth about what happened. So Mandan version number 1 plea deal is he doesn't know for sure that his daddy and Garrett killed Miss Strickland. What he does know is that Garrett, him, and his dad drove to my sister's house on, let me think what story 1. Story 1 was Tuesday morning, the 23rd. They drove to her house. He sat in the car. My son and his daddy went inside my sister's house. As he's sitting in Garrett's car, this first story was he didn't hear anything. He didn't see anything. All he knows is that they came out and they had arrowheads and guns, and that they left. He didn't hear gunshots. He didn't see anything. That was story number 1 plea deal. And there he's going to have 15 years for it. We go to the plea hearing for that, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, his court-appointed lawyer, who happens to be the son of our post-conviction attorney, I know, only in a small town, right?
Yeah.
His son is court-appointed to represent Mandan. Okay, and Mandan is done giving this plea deal, and it's that my sister was killed Tuesday morning as the sun was coming up. He says all of this, okay? At this plea hearing for 15 years, his grandmother has mortgaged her property and has hired him a lawyer out of Jacksonville who's going to come in, and they're going to get a better deal for Mandan than 15 years. He rejects the plea deal, and you can just see the prosecutors, James McCain and John Weed, they are floored. We are ecstatic because we've already told them that as Shelley's family member, we don't want a plea deal for them, okay? Let them go to trial just like our son did. Because by this time, our son has already been to trial and been found guilty. And I'll back up and talk about that in a second. But at that time, he had already been found guilty. So they offer this plea deal, and he rejects it. He hires that lawyer, or the grandma hires that lawyer out of Jacksonville. So everybody's floored. We're happy because I step up to him and I'm like, so I guess you guys didn't see that coming. Absolutely not. And they said, well, we'll be going to trial because he will not be offered another plea deal. And we're like, good, because that's what we want. We wanted to stand trial.
Did they ever offer Garrett a plea deal?
Never. No, never offered Garrett a plea deal. And his lawyer kept saying, now, if there's anything you need to tell us, I can probably get you a plea deal. And Garrett's like, give me a lie detector test. He said, I don't know anything. They did not tell me anything. I can't tell you anything about them. If I did, I'd be lying. And they talk about, because he told him, he said, listen, if you get a plea deal, you've got to tell the truth because you're going to have to pass a polygraph. And my son even said, he's like, listen, I can say anything you want me to say, but I'm not going to pass a polygraph because it's not the truth. They did not tell me that they murdered my aunt. I have no idea at all that they murdered my aunt. I mean, they didn't talk about it in front of me. They didn't tell me. I don't know, No, he was never offered a plea deal. Lo and behold, I don't even remember how many months rock on, but, they can't offer him another plea deal because he's done turned down the plea deal on my sister's murder. But while Mandan was incarcerated in our local jail, he beat up his cellmate, and he was found to have been in possession of a shank. He had cut a hole in his mattress and had a shank held up in it, and they found it. So he got new felony charges while he's in jail wait for this to go to trial. So because he got these new charges, they now offer him a second plea deal. And now his plea deal is that my sister was killed on Monday night, not Tuesday morning like the first plea deal they gave him. It was Monday night, because by this time, red flags have already really surfaced, and that's what I was talking about at Garrett's trial. At Garrett's trial, to be honest, that is where we really realized something wasn't right. I would even say to Baya Harrison was his name. That was the court-appointed attorney for my son. I was talking to Baya, and I'd be like, Baya, what in the world? What? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what they have to say, because I would listen, and it would all be about Rodney. And so then they got up at Garrett's trial, and all of a sudden the story was Garrett. I mean, I'm literally writing a note to Baya going, Baya, pull his interview. That is not what he said. Like, in other words, cross-examine him on this. Like, where did this story come from? Where is this interview, this version of your story? It was awful. Like, Baya just tripped all over himself. I mean, he did nothing. He called no witnesses. Like, when we got to the end, like after the state had presented all of their people and all of these stories, and we're going, what is going on here, He rested, like when they rested his case, he said, we have no witnesses to call. I'm like, Baya. He's like, no, I think we've done a good job. I think they can see through it. I think that they can see that Garrett was railroaded, and it's all good. Tells Garrett not to take the stand. We should have insisted that Garrett take the stand. You're the attorney. Tell us. I mean, we don't know. You tell us what to do, but all this stuff is just unfolding like quick. Like, his trial was literally 2 days. So, I mean, it's just bam, bam, bam. And, I mean, I knew they were going to find him guilty because they made him look guilty. I mean, they presented nothing to counter it. And even, too, we didn't even know all of what we know now. Like, I'm fixing to tell you about all the evidence that we uncovered post-conviction that is just mind-blowing.
And that gives way to ineffective assistance of counsel.
100%. I mean, without a doubt, 100%. Now they are offering a second plea deal. Like, this is all, Garrett's found guilty. All this is over and done with. And he comes in for his second plea deal that's now Monday night. And he now has a new version, a new story. He says that he did go into the house. They all three went into my sister's house. It was at night, Monday night. And if you knew my sister's house, you would know that that was next to impossible. Like, nobody would go in there. You have to walk right by her bedroom to even get into her living room where all the arrowheads and stuff were. No way that you wouldn't have woke her up. And who in their right mind would go in there knowing that she's home? So anyway.
Yeah, the scenario wouldn't be her sitting slumped over in her car. It would have been in her bedroom.
Yes. And two, like, my sister was dressed in a dress when she was killed. So if they woke her up in the middle of the night, she wouldn't have been asleep in her dress.
Right.
She would have been asleep in her T-shirt or, even nude possibly. We get hot when we get older, ladies.
Right. Exactly. But, especially in Florida in the summertime.
Yes, exactly. He says that his newest version, and I have to even interject this, they do a plea hearing for this in front of the same judge that has presided over the whole case, over my son's trial and everything. We are adamantly opposed. My parents, her daughter, Jessica, is not speaking to us, so she's right there along with the prosecution. She's all for whatever it is that they're doing. But my parents, myself, my sister's son is in trouble at that time and in jail. My father spoke to him, and he was against the Whiddens being offered a plea deal. Matter of fact, he was in jail at the same time that the Whiddens were in jail. They had to keep them on separate wings. Mandan was telling everybody that he was gonna kill Michael, my sister's son, but he was sending word out, and they have it documented, like people coming forward saying that he's trying to put a hit on my nephew while they're in jail together. And they were supposed to be bringing Michael to that plea hearing so that he could speak to the judge to say that he did not want the plea deal given to Mandan. Conveniently, they didn't bring him up there. He didn't show.
Wow.
So my father and I each spoke at this plea hearing, and this was the first mega taste of what are they doing. First of all of a sudden, to offer Mandan another plea deal, period, after he had already been given one, but secondly, because it's a completely different day that he's now saying, and he goes in, because at this time, I know it's hard to tell the story, at this time, we have, with our new attorney, we have found evidence that Garrett was in Jacksonville at a pawn shop on Tuesday morning, 8-something in the morning. His thumbprint is on there. His GPS, he had used his GPS to navigate over there. When we had asked prior to Garrett going to trial about the GPS to see if there was any kind of report or anything that could be extracted from it, right, Prosecutor John Weed told the court-appointed lawyer for Garrett that it had been examined and that nothing was on it. Leah Harrison, court-appointed lawyer, told us that they had checked it out, that he had hired a private investigator that checked it out, and that nothing panned out, that there was no sign of Garrett being in Jacksonville any that week. So we went with it. We didn't know any better. Well, afterwards, due to our craziness, we found out that Garrett indeed was in Jacksonville. It was indeed on Tuesday, the 23rd, which was the original day that they said my sister was murdered, during smack up in the middle of the time frame that they gave for when my sister was murdered. And so now Mandan is that's exactly why Mandan was given a second plea deal, because they needed to move us away. They needed to move the murder from the time slot that Garrett had a guaranteed alibi for, of the morning of the 23rd. Also, the time that their own medical examiner said that my sister was murdered. They needed to change that, so they used Mandan to do it. They used Mandan to say that she was killed on Monday night. They also take a pill container at the same time that they arrest Mandan and Rodney back on January 21st, when they were arrested the first time and charged with my sister's murder. Mm-hmm. And whenever that grand jury issued that superseding indictment for my son, we find out that they went and collected my sister's daily pill container. 7 months later, after my sister was murdered, all of a sudden, Robbie Hooker, the lead local investigator, somehow all of a sudden thinks that this pill container needs to be collected. They go collect it on January 20, on the 21st. We found out on the 22nd, the grand jury was reconvened, and that's whenever the superseding indictment was given. So that tells us right off there's something to do with this pill container. Robbie Hooker had photographed the pill container when he went the 7 months later in an unsecured home to collect it. He photographed it, and in the Tuesday slot, in the pictures, there was only one pill visible. Well, right, all of a sudden, when it's presented to the grand jury and also used at my son's trial, all of the pills are now in the Tuesday slot.
Didn't the coroner's report show that she had some undigested pills in her stomach?
Yes, they did. And that was not brought to our attention until after Garrett's trial. It was never mentioned at trial. We didn't know it. That was the one area that I could listen to people's interviews, but I did not look at my sister's autopsy report back at that time. Just
understandable.
Yeah, I didn't. So I didn't know that prior to Garrett's trial. Since then, I have read it. I haven't looked at pictures still to this day, and I won't ever, but I did read it because that was a big part of us presenting evidence at an evidentiary hearing post-conviction. Went nowhere. So much information presented of all this wrongdoing that was done. The same judge, Judge Fenna, same one that presided over everything and has denied everything we've ever put in front of him, also denied, but that pill container turned out to be quite the piece of evidence. And Ironically, when Robbie Hooker went to collect it on the 21st there, in his own words, forgot to write a report on it. So there was no written report on it. So we're talking no chain of custody whatsoever concerning this pill container. He put it in his, quote, locked vault, which was the trunk, his locked mobile vault. That's what he called it, which was the trunk of his car. It was not turned into the courthouse where they keep the evidence locker. Mm-hmm. When it was turned into the evidence locker, I would have to pull my notes to tell you, but I don't know, 8 days later, maybe.
Yeah, I think I remember reading it was like a week later he finally turned it in.
He turned it in. There's no signature. He doesn't sign like normally they're supposed to sign when they turn in evidence. No signature on it, no nothing. There was our post-conviction attorney, he's like, that's what they used to get the superseding indictment. Somebody has put the pills back in the Tuesday slot to make it look as if she didn't take her medicine. And if you go back at trial, John Weed that's what he used to reference time of death, despite his own medical examiners, 12 to 24 hours. He kept referencing, we know that she was killed Monday because her Tuesday pills weren't taken. Who does that? Who is not after the truth? And why are they doing backflips to help Mandan Whidden, who has confessed multiple times to actually being the murderer of my sister? And here they are offering a second plea deal only because he got new felony charges in jail for beating him up and having a shake. That's the charge that they used to be able to offer him the second plea deal. He's supposed to testify against his daddy at trial. So we go to Rodney's trial. We're waiting and waiting and waiting, and it never starts. Come to find out, Mandan has pulled everything out again. He told him that he made everything up. It was all a lie, that he had been coerced to say all that, and that he wasn't testifying. John Weed, who just is looking, like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? He comes to us. I'm like, so you don't have him to testify. You still have, there were tons of other witnesses that could have testified against Rodney. And he's like, well, I just don't feel like we have a case without Mandan. I'm like, Mandan didn't testify against Garrett. You didn't feel that way at Garrett's trial. Well, I just don't think we can do this. We're going to get him for dealing in stolen property, and he's a habitual offender, so we're going to go for a double sentence on it. So when we are at Rodney's trial, all of that comes up. I mean, I could not contain myself. That Albert Willis, all of them were all there, and I walk up and I go, oh my God, are y'all kidding me? Mandan lied? Because they knew that whole thing was a lie. It was a whole thing made up by them. They just needed it to not be Tuesday because they were afraid we were going to come back on appeal and win and show all of the corruptness that they had done, because we were really starting to find all kinds of stuff that was going on that was very, very shady. And they're just all red-faced, And so it comes to the time, so they do a plea deal with him. They plea deal, and they tell Rodney that he's going to get 15 years. They don't really tell Rodney that they're going to go for a habitual offender, which is going to double it. They don't tell him that. So Rodney he's thinking he's only going to get 15 years. So my mom, we all speak, and we just, we say our part about, we're very disappointed that Rodney is not going to stand trial. We were even more disappointed, Judge, that Mandan was given a second plea deal. And so now here he is. He's admitted that he's lied again. And by the way, Mandan ended up with a life sentence because of that. It's like associated with the murder, but he's not a convicted murderer.
Wow.
But he got a life sentence out of it. But Rodney, after my mom gave a real heartfelt plea to the judge there at Rodney's sentence. And I guess it struck Rodney because Rodney wanted to speak. And his lawyer says, I have highly recommended that he not, but he's going against my advice and he wants to issue a statement. Rodney gets up. Now, this is before he's sentenced. And he says, well, Judge, I just want to say this whole thing has been a fiasco. I'm going to paraphrase it for you. This whole thing has been a fiasco. I can't say that Garrett Arrowood killed that lady. I don't know if he killed her. I'm not sure about that. I just know. And he turns around and points. He says, all I can tell you is that FDLE FDLE agent right there, Albert Willis, and he points at him. And everybody in the courtroom turns around and looks at him, and his face turns beet red. And he's looking, he says, all I can do is tell you that that officer right there told me that if I'd put the guns in Garrett's hands, that all my troubles would go away. He says this in court now.
Wow.
And Albert Willis starts shaking his head, and he even says, I did not say that. And I just look at him like, oh, if my eyeballs could have killed that man.
Ooh.
I look at him, I'm like, wow, And so he's like, he finishes up. I feel sorry. I know Miss Strickland was a good woman and she didn't deserve this. And to be honest with you, I was kind of wondering because Rodney has been so tight-lipped. I know Rodney is capable of great evil. Trust me, I've heard the stories. There has been other people have said that he has killed his own mother. In her deposition, told our court-appointed attorney in her deposition that she thought that Rodney killed his father.
Oh, wow.
She told him that she thought that he put a pillow over her because his dad was dying with cancer, and that he went in to see him, and that she thought Rodney put a pillow over his head and suffocated him. Now, what mother says that?
A mother that knows her child is evil.
That's right. We are just sitting there all floored. So he finishes saying all of that, and I'm like, wow. I cannot believe he just did that. So he gets done and he sits down, and then they sentence him. And they sentence him as a habitual offender and doubled the 15 years to 30. I mean, he even said, what? 30? You told me I was getting 15 years. So there we go. So Rodney goes away for 30 years. Mandan's in prison for a life sentence. My son is a convicted felony murder, although they did not find him guilty of being in possession of the gun. He just got the felony murder. They couldn't say that he was the shooter kind of deal, but long story short, he's the only one that was ever charged with my sister's murder.
And yet he's the one that has the alibi for the time of death, according to the coroner.
That is correct. Yeah. And how that, I'm going to back up and tell this little story. The day before Garrett's trial started, I had earnestly just been praying, like, God, if Garrett did this, show me, because I needed to know. I needed to know if my son's going to prison for life. I need to be able to accept this, and I can accept this if he killed my sister, because that's the right thing, So I'm praying that earnest prayer, and God, if he didn't, show me so I know how to help him. So there was this guy that was supposed to, Lester Terry is his name. He was set to testify for the prosecution against Garrett to say that if he saw Garrett's vehicle in the driveway, he's kind of neighbors to my sister. There's one driveway, one plot of land between his land and my sister's land. And he was supposed to testify that on Wednesday, I don't remember if it's Wednesday or Tuesday, it doesn't matter. Anyway, he was set to testify that he saw my son's Trailblazer in the driveway between his house and my sister's house, and as John Weed, the prosecutor, put it, looking to see if she had been discovered. It would have been Tuesday because it would have been the day before, that he was in there, pulled in the driveway, sitting there, and they allege that he was looking to see if my sister had been discovered. Now, right off the bat, because I live here, you don't have to pull up in a driveway to see if my sister's garage door is open. You see it very clearly from the road. Even that theory, it just paints the wrong picture. Like I was telling the attorney, I'm like, maybe even bring the jury out there and let them see how crazy that is, because that's crazy. Nobody would pull up in the driveway to see if she was discovered. They would simply look from the road to see if the garage door was open,
Yeah, kind of drive by.
Simply drive by. So that was a correspondence I was having back and forth before the trial with them. And I said, even more importantly than that, remember, Garrett is on video surveillance. It's a place called South House. That was one of the places that Garrett had went into to sell Arrowhead. Another point that I made to the court-appointed lawyer, I'm like, look, Garrett might be a little dents in the head from drug use, but he's not so stupid that if he just murdered his aunt, stole her arrowheads, he's not going to go to the local South House which is a furniture shop / pawn shop in town, and sell her arrowheads, okay?
Right.
And he was up trying to sell arrowheads to the owner. His name is Mark. I'm like, Garrett, he might be a little slow, but he ain't that slow. Like, that is another indicator to me that he clearly thought the arrowheads belonged to the Wittens and had no way, shape, or form, thought that they came from my sister's house. I'm saying about this guy that's going to testify, I say, he's on video surveillance at South House at the same time that the guy is saying that the vehicle is parked over there in the driveway looking to see if my sister's been discovered. I'm like, you can just blow that right out by that because he's on video surveillance. It don't lie. Aya Harrison sends me a picture of Garrett, and he goes, this is the video surveillance of Garrett in South House at the same time that you're talking about, right? Well, I just take a look at it, just briefly talking back and forth with Maya. Never seen this picture of Garrett supposedly in South House. I take one look at it. First thing right off, it's not South House. So I mean, that's the very first thing. I'm like, this ain't South House. Click the picture and I blow it up. And when I blow it up, it's got the timestamp on it and it's the date and it's not Wednesday. It was 100% now it was Wednesday. That's when the guy was saying that it was the day my sister was discovered. Okay. Because I remember that clearly. That's how we knew that Garrett was in Jacksonville. That was the first indication because when I blow up the photo, it's not Wednesday, which is the day that Garrett's in South House. It's Tuesday. So I email back to Baya and I'm like, where did you get this? What? First of all, this is not South House. And he emails me back, well, the state attorney's office says this is South House. I don't care what they say. I live in Perry. I know what South House looks like. More importantly, look at the date. It is Tuesday. Leading up, Baya he really had us all convinced that Garrett was just passed out on drugs on Tuesday, the day that Shelley was killed, because we didn't know Garrett was in Jacksonville at that time because he had already squashed all that. He told us he checked it out. It didn't pan out. There was no evidence on the GPS, so we just bought that. We didn't think they would lie. I said, oh my gosh, that is Tuesday, because Baya even opened the statement with he's passed out in the high on drugs in that camper, on that Tuesday. That's what he says.
Wow.
That's what we believe. Now all of a sudden there's this picture the day before the trial starts of him at a place. Where is this place? Baya doesn't know. But listen, he's got to get prepared for his opening statement. He'll bring it tomorrow when he comes because that's when jury selection is going to come. He's going to bring the disc with it on there for me so I can pop it in the computer and take a look at it. Okay. Well, all night I'm just in, where is that? Like, I don't have a clue where this is. It just cannot even get any worse. He comes busting in the door. I had to go to Payless Shoes and buy these shoes. I'm sorry I'm running late. My dog chewed my shoes. I had to go buy these shoes and I need you. Do you have some poster board in here? I need some poster board. And yes, I have some poster board, Baya, can I see that disc? I want to see that picture of Garrett. Oh, I forgot it. I've been so busy, I forgot it. But we'll deal with this later. Let's get through jury selection. Okay, we get through jury selection. Trial actually even starts. They do opening statements that afternoon. So here I'm still sitting here thinking, where is this picture? Where was he on this Tuesday? No mention of it whatsoever. It's never shown in court. I've just seen it the day before for the very first time. I'm wondering where it is. We go through the trial. No mention of it. The next day comes. Well, that's where we should start. The next day comes, and I talked to Baya. He promises me he's bringing me that disc so we can take a look at it. Us in there, he forgets it. At the end of the day, I said, Baya, we're going to follow you back to your house and get Lisa. I am just too exhausted for that. Listen, I promise you, I'm going to bring it. I just don't see how it can help us. Nothing's going to. It's him in some pawn shop. It just makes him look more guilty, like he's out trying to pawn everything. And state attorneys, are you calling them a liar? Are you saying this is not South House? I said, I'm not calling them anything. I'm just telling you, drive you down to South House and let you take a look. Like, it's clearly not South House. I need to know where it is.
Right.
I promise we're going to deal with this. Well, we don't. He never brings it. we get, like I said, the trial was very short, didn't last long. So bam, Garrett's found guilty. I blew the picture up. Now this is, they let us go see Garrett, like after he's found guilty. I don't remember if it was that same day he was found guilty, they let us see him, or if it was the next day, but one of those two. I just waltzed right on up into the prison visitation. I'm like over it by this point, I just waltz right in there with it, and I pop it in the window, and I say, Garrett, where is this? He don't have any idea what day it is or anything, and he goes, it's just like a light bulb. I mean, you can just see it, and he goes, that is Tallahassee, he said. And like, because I'm still thinking all I've ever heard is Jacksonville,
Mm-hmm.
Well, he says, that is Tallahassee. He says, that is the day that I went to Jacksonville. I went, you remember? And I'm thinking, no, I don't remember you telling me you went to Tallahassee. Well, he had told Baya. That's the whole thing, too. Baya kept telling us, like, every time we would go to visit Garrett at the jail, do not talk about the case. What a mistake. We should have. We didn't have anything to hide. We should have, but we weren't. Like, we were just not talking about the case, like, because he just kept telling us they're recording everything. They can use everything against him. And I kept telling Baya, even to the point where Baya got mad at me. I'm like, look, if he did it, he needs to be found guilty. Lisa, I am his defense attorney. I said, well, I don't care. I am Shelly's sister. And if he's guilty, I don't want you getting him off. He needs to be found guilty,
Right.
I mean, we should have talked, but I did. And so, Garrett had told Baya on the maybe 3 times that Baya ever even went to see him prior to his trial. He had went Jacksonville to Tallahassee. For Garrett's found guilty. Where is this? Light bulb. That's Tallahassee. That's the day I went to Jacksonville. He said, and he tells me exactly what he pawned. I pawned a rod and reel in Jacksonville, and he pawned a bow and arrow, an old bow and arrow that he had. Said I got $50 for it in Tallahassee. Where in Tallahassee? He tells us Cash America over by the mall. My husband and I literally, like, we couldn't go to Tallahassee right then. It's an hour drive. First morning, we're up at the crack of dawn, have my picture in hand. We drive to Tallahassee, walk in the pawn shop. I need to know, is Garrett accurate? Is his brain functioning? Because if it is, if this is indeed Tallahassee, where he just told me it was, we got to do something, because we got a problem. This is Tuesday when I know my sister was killed. Like, I have no idea why they're trying to back up at trial to make it Monday night. The only thing that made sense, and there is tons of communication between Baya and I, he has no idea why they back it up to Monday. He claims that it was because they had Garrett on video surveillance, like at 2 a.m. getting gas at a gas station. That was what they were trying to claim, was that he's out and about doing all of this stuff. I walk in that pawn shop, and I stand there, and the people are like, hi, can we help you? Garrett Arrowood. He is right. He is standing right here, and I'm holding it, comparing it with everything, and I'm like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? And he was in Jacksonville before this. So, now I've learned so much. Now I know that we didn't even have to do that. There was a store number over in that side that it would have pulled up the exact location of it. Baya Harrison got that from John Weed, the prosecutor. I don't know when he got it, but that tells me that they knew. If they had Tallahassee, they knew, because they're linked. They were both Cash Americas. If they had that picture of him in Tallahassee at Cash America, they knew he was in Jacksonville a couple hours before it. But conveniently, well, who knows? I mean, I don't know. I've never got the whole case from Baya Harrison. Who knows what they sent them? I know that our attorney, post-conviction attorney that we hired, paid a private investigator to drive to Jacksonville, and she went around like Lincoln from the information she had off the Tallahassee one. She found the Cash America where Garrett was, got a copy of the invoice, copy of his thumbprint, exact timestamp of where he was there, and that he had pawned a rod and reel exactly like he had said.
So that's why they changed the time of death to Monday night.
And that's why they did the whole thing with the pill container with no proper chain of custody whatsoever. Like, that should have never even been admitted as evidence, because there was no proper chain of custody. Matter of fact, they presented it as if it had been collected from the scene on the day of the crime. We never knew until David Collins found that it had, been collected 7 months after on the day before the grand jury. We didn't know any of all of that until long after. That was post-conviction. And with the GPS, he had reached out to John Weed, the prosecutor. He told him that it had been examined and nothing was on it. Okay, so he told Via Harrison that, I don't remember. Anyway, to the point of what he told the post-conviction attorney. He told him that it had been examined and nothing was on it. Well, by this time, his name is David Collins, our post-conviction attorney, had been already catching. He's like, something is not right. He said, I'm literally scratching my head because I have worked with John Weed for many years, and I've never known him to be anything but truthful, straight up. But he had already been catching him in some lies. And so he said, just for good measure, I'm going to do a public records search. He did a public records search, and sure enough, the GPS had been examined, and there was a complete report on it, and it clearly, it had the timestamp of where Garrett was in Jacksonville, and that had been done almost to the day, 1 month, exactly 4 weeks after Garrett had been arrested. A month to the day, that report had been generated. Our lawyer says, look, this is all an email too. He emails him back. He's like, look, John, I'm not pointing any fingers, but you told me that there was nothing on the GPS, and I just did a public records research, or search, not research, search, and it was examined, and there was a report. He's like, oh, well, my goodness, he played dumb. Now, trust, John Weed is not dumb. And if your lead suspect, like the one that you think has done this murder, and if they have a GPS in their car, do you think that you forgot to go pick up the report from the GPS?
Nope, you did everything you could to bury that report because it did not fit the narrative.
Yes, you did.
There is something I want to ask you, though. Going back to the jury selection. Why did he only have a 6-person jury? That's it for today's episode of Wickedly Judged. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of this fight for justice. Be sure to join us in the next episode as we conclude our powerful conversation with Lisa Arrowood. You won't want to miss the rest of this discussion. It's eye-opening, to say the least. And remember, if you or someone you know has a case that needs reviewing, or if you have evidence related to any of the cases we've covered, if you would like to support the show through sponsorships or donations, reach out to us. Every piece of information, every bit of support, brings us one step closer to uncovering the truth. You can contact us through social media or email wickedlyjudged@gmail.com, or you can phone us 513-393-7452. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with anyone who believes in justice. Your voice matters. Until next time, stay informed, stay persistent, and never stop seeking the truth.